Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us at ATM Online. Now for the Global Business Travel Association panel discussion entitled We Can Meet. My name is Glenn Johnston, Vice President, Middle East and Global Public Affairs for AviaReps, and it's my very great pleasure to be able to moderate today's session. It also gives me extreme pleasure to be able to introduce our panel of thought leaders and specialists as we delve into the challenges, opportunities, and also the innovations taking place to take MICE events into the future for a safe and sustainable future. So without any further ado, I'd like to start just by introducing our panelists, who will be Mr. Ayman Talat, CEO of Extra Mile Group, Mr. Graham Pope, Vice President Sales of Cvent, Emra Kinaju, Director of Sales and Marketing for the Sofitel Bahrain, Zalak Thalassa Sea and Spa, and Mr. Ali Faladi, Tourism Advisor to the Bahrain Tourism Board. So welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
I would now like to ask each of our panelists just to give a 2-minute introduction of themselves and how they sort of see the MICE industry at this particular point in time. So I'd like to start off by reaching out to you, Ayman.
Thank you for having me, and I would like to thank all our audience for being with us today. My name is Ayman Talat. I'm the founder and CEO of Extra Mile Middle East, specialized in corporate events, marketing services, and also known as a DMC in the Middle East with our offices in Dubai and in Egypt as well. I have to say that the way we see the market going forward, it's the current situation, as difficult as it is, it's changing the way the MICE industry would look, not only in our region, but probably globally as well, in terms of all the aspects that we knew before about the industry, in terms of length of stays, type of events, the structure of events itself. Hence, as we did in Extra Mile, because of the diversity of services that Extra Mile always had since 2008, that varied all the way from the travel services to the MICE part, all alongside with the design, digital, and virtual events, which we started since 2018 with the hybrid events for some of our clients. That left us geared up to actually be able to strategize and face the pandemic. Nevertheless, also learn a new strategies for the future going forward to be able to face the ever-changing phase of our industry going forward from today till the time to come. As funny enough, we need to learn a whole new set of skills, not only for us as a whole overall companies, but also for our teams, event managers, where we have to work on their set of skills to be able to cater to the new needs of our clients. So that said, yes, we're up against some challenging times, but if we strategize right, it's going to be quite a fun ride. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward for the rest of the session.
Thank you, Ayman. And may I now pass it over to Graham to give your perspective.
You may. Thank you, Glenn. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Graham Pope. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of International Sales for Cvent. So I look after our teams across Europe, the Middle East, India, and APAC. Spent almost 20 years in the events industry, events and hospitality industry. So I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly across the sector over that time. But I'd like to sort of frame up today's conversation with a statement and then some statistics, which will give some real insight into what is happening across the sector right now from a Cvent perspective. Now, some of these numbers may surprise you, but I'll start by saying that I believe we're headed finally in a very positive direction. Now, there are two reasons for that. One is that there are very positive trends happening in the marketplace in general, but the second is around digital transformation. And when I say digital transformation, I mention that because Cvent is in the fortunate position of being one of the providers of digital transformation. So the numbers we see through our platform are probably amplified further in light of the fact that more people are embracing technology and going through that digital transformation, to Ayman's point, changing the way they work in the events and hospitality sector moving forward. But to give you some insight, if we took Dubai as an example, a large meetings and events space, in March, we saw approximately a 24% increase in the number of RFPs going from planners to venues over March in 2020. Jump forward to April, that increase amplified to 250% over April 2020. Now, these numbers are quite staggering, but I would put it in context and say we're not back to 2019 levels just yet, but we're certainly trending in the right direction. And that is also mirrored across the Middle East as well. Middle East saw a 63% increase over that period versus 2020 as well. A couple of other stats we're seeing is the booking windows are reducing. So if we went back to January of this year, the typical booking window in Dubai, for example, was around 235 days from the date an RFP is sent to the date an event happens. As we move forward over the year, that's reduced down now to 136 days, which is almost down to the sort of pre-pandemic booking window frame of 112 days. So we're seeing a very similar pattern across Middle East. And what I would say is the whole Middle East region, if you exclude the US and look globally, the Middle East region is the fastest in terms of that booking window recovery, which is, again, is a very positive trend that we're seeing across the platform. In terms of events themselves, we're seeing some larger events coming back. So 100 plus person events are seeing the strongest growth actually through our platform, which is very interesting insight. And we're also seeing event durations increasing, positive signs with regard to ADR. And the last thing I'll say is that in terms of the types of properties being sourced to, many of those are seeing strong growth in the luxury sector as well. So a few stats that I wanted to sort of frame up today's conversation with, because I wanted to give some real detailed insight into what we're seeing, which I'm sure will prompt a lot of debate. But that's it from me.
Thank you, Graham. And yes, I'm sure we'll revisit a lot of those topics raised by you and by Ayman as well. And I'm sure, no doubt, also with what Emre is going to present with us too. Please, Emre.
Thank you for the introduction, Glenn, and thank you for the great insights, Graham. It is really interesting. Delighted to be here with everyone else. My name is once again Emre Kirazci, looking after the commercial division at the Sofitel Bahrain. I have been in the region for the last decade, working in Bahrain as well as in Dubai. Meetings, events, conferences, exhibition industry has seen some light in the tunnel. As we all know, in the last couple of months, we all had the privilege to attend to the first travel exhibition after 2 years of not meeting each other in Dubai, thanks to the United Arab Emirates and Dubai government for giving us this opportunity, having face-to-face meetings after 2 years for the first time. I think for all of us, this is some sort of a light and it is a big motivation. Here at the property level, we have seen throughout the whole pandemic, thanks to the Kingdom of Bahrain and the Ministry of Health here, the extensive regulations and the efforts that they have done for the vaccination, we have done a very smooth period of COVID, probably in comparison to some other large countries like India, Brazil, etc., and United States. Bahrain has never seen a lockdown. Obviously, the meeting industry in an overall has been affected, but we have had, throughout the years, we have had the opportunity to conduct some social events, which give us also a more further confidence in regards to the fact that the social events will gradually come back, probably earlier than meetings and conferences. And we look forward to having more vaccination numbers in the country so that we can probably open up and host those events again anyways. One thing that made a big impact for Bahrain, probably back in March, we have had the first sport events. We have hosted the Formula One. Most of the drivers traditionally stay here at Sofitel Bahrain due to our close proximity to the circuit. So it was a privilege again after the whole year of COVID, having a sport event, a large event in the country. And I'm sure Dr. Ali Fulat, our senior advisor from Tourism Authority, will tell much more about it after me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emre. And that gives a very good segue on to Dr. Ali Fulat to be able to take the baton on from there and give us your perspective with regards to Bahrain and perhaps even the region, please.
Well, shall I say good afternoon? Yeah, it is a good afternoon or good evening to everybody. My name is Dr. Ali Fulat. I'm Acting Director of Marketing and Tourism Promotion in Bahrain Tourism and Exhibition Authority. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer. Thank you very much for inviting me and to be with my colleagues in this very important session. Well, I won't repeat what Mr. Amri has mentioned about the tourism sector in Bahrain. So I suggest, I think that I will give the audience, due to the short period of time, I'll give the audience an overview of the situation of international tourism during 2020 and 2021. I will compare it with figures. This is just the latest figure we as a BTA, Bahrain Tourism Exhibition Authority, we've been received from UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization. We'll give you the overall impact of the international tourism industry in 2020 and 2021. And then I will mention to you what the scenarios for the incoming situation. And then these might be, let's say, some of my talk will be, it won't be that good information, or it might highlight like a black picture, but I will end it with the good information. And this will lead me to talk about the latest project we have as far as the MICE is concerned, which is Bahrain New Exhibition and Convention Center. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic, Dr. Ali. So there's a lot to cover there, even just from everyone's introduction. So perhaps, if I may, I'd like to start off with you, Graham. You've provided some information about that there is a rebound to physical events, I'm assuming, but I'd like to also ask, given that we've gone through everything with the pandemic and as things are slowly opening up, are there any particular areas or major focal points that we perhaps have to concentrate on, whether it be as event planners or even as organizers or even as sponsors of events, that perhaps we didn't have to really consider prior to COVID?
Yeah, so thanks, Glenn. That's a very broad question. I think it's there's a lot to answer in that. But I think one thing I'll start by saying is this pandemic has changed the meetings and event sector more so than any other crisis we've had in the past. And I think we can all attest to the fact that many of us have had to adopt virtual technology in one form or another for the first time. And that's certainly the case among a lot of event planners and hoteliers. So that virtual event solutions is something that's been a bit of a dark art for many people. And as a result, as we move forward and look towards the return of in-person events, which I should say there's great appetite for, I don't think the virtual element's going to go away. So we term it hybrid events. We believe hybrid events are very much here to stay. And I think that's one of the biggest, most fundamental changes we're going to see in the space in the near future. But with that comes a number of challenges. The requests from event planners, whether they're planning virtual events or in-person events, those requests have changed now. So venues, the requests that event planners are asking for have changed, whether it's the ability to adopt virtual technology, whether it's the ability to cater for the needs with infrastructure and bandwidth from Wi-Fi perspective, whether it's the need to look at safety measures, health and safety measures, or floor planning and social distancing. These are all new things that event planners are requesting as part of that RFP process when they look to the return of in-person events and, of course, hybrid events as well. But I would say that the positive out of it is that planners now have realized the benefits of virtual. And I'll probably talk about it a bit later, but when we look back at our particular event, Event Connect is one of the sort of biggest industry events we have in the industry. In the US, we ran it in 2020, and we had 43,000 attendees versus 4,500 the year prior in person. So we reached a massive audience. And I think that's one of the things that's really going to change. And the benefit that virtual is going to bring is that the hybrid element is going to see an increase in virtual attendance, which is going to drive an increase in in-person attendance as well. And event planners off the back of that have now realized that through a hybrid platform, they can reach a much wider audience and generate a much larger return on investment from their events program, which is very important. So that's all very positive news for the event sector in the short to longer term. But there are a number of things that planners need to consider. As I mentioned, when it comes to in-person events, the health and safety of floor planning, critical considerations that I think are going to be here for quite some time. But it also impacts hotels being asked certain questions. So when RFPs are submitted, when we look at what's going through our platform, there's a whole host of new questions that planners are asking of venues now. And I would say that in many cases, a slight lack of knowledge around what hybrid looks like, what virtual is, what it means, what they need from hotel partners and venues, for example, which means that from a planner perspective, there's now a greater reliance on the venues and partners for information in how to host their events successfully. So you've got two sides of the industry who both are facing a challenge of probably less resource, a greater reliance on one another in order to make sure their events are fully catered for and are successful. So that means that we need to adapt very, very quickly. And that talks to the adoption of digital technology, software to improve efficiency, to create faster responses, to do more in an online environment or virtual environment than we ever have done before. So yes, by and large, the demands of event planners have changed. And I think we're going to see a new scope of meetings and events in the future. But to coin a phrase that our CEO used at our conference, as we move forward and we see this massive increase in virtual and in-person attendance, we really are going to be entering the golden age of events. So I think that's the real positive to take away from this.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and especially how you mentioned quite a bit with regards to hospitality brands and their particular properties and venues, which I think it really is a great opportunity to ask Emre. Do you see this in the same way? You had also mentioned that even throughout this period, you've been able to have some physical events as well. But have things changed? Have things changed for you? And do you see that going forward as well?
Most certainly, a lot of consumer behaviors changed, but not by default. We have seen a big movement towards digital solutions, digitalization within the guest experience, from a guest experience towards contractual terms. But it is always obviously a matter of choice by the guest. We have seen still a movement towards incentive travel, specifically from logistic firms, technology firms, because throughout the pandemic they have been doing well. They have been rewarding their employees with further incentives, without conducting any meetings, with just having leisure stays for their employees. With the whole guest experience also, in order to have more contactless solutions, become more digital. For instance, just to give you an example, Accor as a brand, in order to ensure that the guests are having a safe experience, as safeguarding, welcoming and taking care of our guests is at the heart of who we are and what we do. Accor has done a program called All Safe, which worked in collaboration with AXA, and which has been certified by a French firm in terms of validation. All Safe includes a number of protocols, and some of them are contactless check-in procedure and check-out procedure. Those are all digital solutions, basically. We see also as I mentioned, it is all a matter of choice by the guest. Some guests are still keen to have a person in the reception whom they solve their request, and some guests are more keen to communicate those requests through a WhatsApp message and do their checkouts with digital payment solutions, etc. In regards to the contractual terms, also consumer behaviors change a lot, obviously, as the default with the COVID restrictions. We see more and more requests for further flexibility from us in terms of cancellation terms, obviously with the COVID situation changing tremendously globally, as well as in Bahrain. And also, for instance, the booking windows also has changed. Now, some of our guests, in regards to social events specifically, have the tendency to book in a more short term. as soon as that the local legislation, the Ministry of Health permits them to do a social event, they have the tendency to book the event and conduct and execute the event at the premises in a much shorter booking window than ever. So those are some keynotes that I am able to share from a unit level with you. But I'm sure later on, Dr. Ali will give you much more from a Ministry of Health and government guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Emre. And before I actually move on to Dr. Ali, I'd also just like to get the perspective of Ayman. And have you been seeing it in the same way? And do you sort of see a move of particular areas of focus that you believe will also be continuing as we go into the future with MICE events?
The question for me, right?
Sorry, this is for Mr. Ayman. I'll be following up with you shortly, Dr. Ali.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Dr. Ali. Of course, I have to say that we've been experiencing all the current changes that Graham has successfully, covered most of them, or nearly all of them. And between Graham and Emery, they covered the entire paradigm. But however, we've been experiencing from a very particular point of view, as well as we have divided our clients into different segments, depending on the type of client and the region of client. And as Emery and Graham had mentioned, the window of booking became a lot shorter on both scales, local corporates or local and regional corporates, and our international clients as well. However, very important change that in the incentive world, for instance, previously we used to have the incentives, especially the international ones, coming for a longer length of stay than the local and regional corporate or the classic corporate meetings. However, now we've been experiencing a trend in most of the requests coming through to our region that the incentive travels have been shorter because the business part of it has been completely shifted to virtual, not even to hybrid, mostly virtual, or hybrid from their own countries. So they don't need to travel to do the business part of the incentive trip. Then the incentive trip became shorter and became purely for the incentive part of it. That will have a significant impact on the length of stays, of course, consequently to the revenues generated from the incentives in our part of the world and our industry in general. Second is that actually the corporate, when we're talking about the external meetings or external, their clients' events requests or their internals, again, the hybrid became a trend, and I totally agree with Graham that definitely this virtual and hybrid is here to stay. And that brings us to the points that Graham has covered, which is venues being ready to receive hybrid events successfully, because when the venues are ready, or the readiness of the venues, of the events venues to receive the hybrid events has a greater role today than ever before in actually making our events and the whole industry success. And the fastest rebound of the industry would happen if our venues are able to help us, not only with the readiness, but also with the mindset. The mindset that all this readiness and all the factors that they need to be ready with, they have great cost impact as well on the overall events budgets. So we're starting from the bandwidth. Not today, I can't convince the client that something like enough bandwidth they need to pay extra for versus before. Before it was a luxury, today it's a must have. The social distancing and the safety and security measures in the venues itself, it has an impact in the numbers that each venue can actually accommodate. From the venue side, be it hotel or conference center, that will affect the revenue per square foot. Very important that the hotels and venues and events venues not to stop trying or not to try to reflect this losses or this cost back on the clients, because that will affect the industry or will hinder the industry going forward. Because after all, the last thing we want to do is actually to go back to the budget holders and give them the idea that, you know what, it will have been 12 months, or actually 13 months today, we're doing purely virtual, which cost a fraction of what face-to-face and hybrid would cost, yet we're still in business. We need to show them the value of doing events again. And the value of doing events comes with the value of the event, the value of having a face-to-face interaction at a cost effectiveness without showing them a greater cost versus what they used to pay even pre-pandemic.
Very interesting. And I think that's a very good leadway also into Dr. Ali. You have the unique position on this panel of representing a national tourism board. We've heard perspectives from actual event planners to venues in the form of hospitality venues, and also providing those supports. At the national level, how have things, and especially perhaps in Bahrain's case specifically, you've been holding actual events, and also how do you see things going forward? And are you focusing your strategy or changing your strategy as we go through this pandemic?
Thank you very much. Let me just, well, I know I have a very short period of time. Let me just talk a little bit on macro level. Okay, we'll start with some figures from the global figures. The drop in the demand, let's say international tourist arrivals worldwide in 2020 is around by 1 billion tourists. This represents minus 73% comparing in 2020 comparing to 2019. And this 1 billion loss in tourists has caused a loss of $1.3 trillion, which is around 11 times in the value of the loss in 2009 during the global economic crisis. And also from the world or global GDP, it's 2.5 till 2.6 trillion. It's more than 2% of the world GDP, and which causes between 100 to 120 million direct tourism jobs at risk. If we take by regions, in 2020 in the Middle East, the drop was minus 74%. In 2019, the Middle East has received 65 million tourists, where in 2020, 18 million. And the expectation by UNWTO for the first quarter will be minus 85% comparing to 2019. Where in Americas, arrival were down by minus 69% in 2020, and expectation again in first quarter of 2021 will be minus 77%. Central and South America down by minus 74% in 2020. Expectation it will be minus 92% in 2021. In Europe, minus 69% in 2020. And in the first quarter in 2021 will be minus 85%. North Europe, which is very affected, it's minus 75%, and the expectation for first quarter of 2021 will be 90%. Having said that, there are UNWTO, which through my readings, they have two scenarios, and those two scenarios is coming along with maybe Emre was talking, and even my colleague. The first scenario will be a rebound in July, which will result in 66% increase in the international tourists in 2021. Even this increase in 66% increase will be 55% below the level of recorded in 2019. So the first scenario will be the rebound in July. The second scenario will be potential rebound in September instead of July. And the expectation, this will lead to 22% increase in arrivals comparing to the last year of 2020. But still, this will be minus 67% comparing 2019. Well, these scenarios is considered to be a number of factors, such as gradual improvement of the situation, rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, significant improvement in traveler confidence, and major lifting of travel restrictions, in particular Europe and America. Well, there was a study by UNWTO by panel of experts. We were also involved. The panel was in January 2021 about the survey for recovery of international tourists. Believe it or not, the stronger among response was in the Middle East comparing to other regions. The experts from the Middle East are more optimistic about the return to pre-pandemic levels, mostly between 2022 and 2023. And yes, based on Hadi, we believe, especially in Bahrain or the region, let's say in the region and mainly in the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council, we think prior to July, for instance, I'll give you an example. In Bahrain, the expectation by July, the rate of vaccine will cover over 70% of the Bahraini population, i.e. the locals and residents. When I said it's 2022 and 2023, that will lead me to we started a very, very important project as far as the MICE is concerned, which is building our Bahrain new exhibition and convention center. We're talking about project was worth $220 million. Okay, we think that we did it at the right time. It was pre-pandemic or pre-COVID, but it will be finished by 2022, by mid or third quarter of next year, and I think it will capture the audience and the international, especially we are introducing the high technology, and as my colleague mentioned, is the time for the face-to-face, or now the time for the more introducing the latest technology and the latest study. So I think it's very important. When I started with the statistic, it's very important to know how was the situation, and based that, the changes and what's going to be the direction. I believe the scenarios by UNTAD is correct. Hopefully the things will come back. It will take time, maybe by 22, 23, but we are there. It's not first time for the humanity, but might be this time it's different, but we are in the right track. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'd like to start and just sort of by circling back to Graham. We had a question that also came in, and it touches on what Dr. Ali was also mentioning with regards to a return to MICE events. And you had mentioned that you're seeing some increases in the next couple of months with regards to inquiries and bookings and RFPs. And one of the questions was, are you seeing them mostly as domestic RFPs, or are they international?
So that's a very interesting question. I think we've certainly seen an increase. If we look at the percentage of RFPs going through our platform over the past 12 months, we've seen an increase in domestic RFPs, which is a fairly obvious thing to say. I think when there's been travel restrictions, people have only been able to source locally for domestic meetings. But when you start to unpack it and break down the sourcing volume that we are seeing, when you look at longer term, we're seeing a strong surge and growth in larger events of 100 people plus with longer durations. In fact, that's probably the largest area of growth that we're seeing, but they are the longer term bookings. Short term bookings, yes, we've seen an increase in domestic and small meetings, small groups in the sort of near 3 months, for example. As we move forward for the bigger events, you're looking 9 months out, a lot of sourcing going into 2022 already. I think that, bear in mind, there's been a number of organizations. I mean, across our platform, we've got sort of 300,000 active users, planners using our technology, but that's growing at a rapid rate because people are now adopting these online solutions to source business. So there's more planners. At one stage, we were adding about 1,800 new planners every month to the platform by promoting it. But the situation has forced people to adopt these types of solutions to source for events. So it's been very interesting to see that pattern, and it does vary across different regions globally. It varies quite significantly. A lot of it's linked to market conditions, the vaccine status in certain areas, the opening of international travel, of course. But yes, we've seen an increase in domestic, but longer term, certainly an increase in overall events, larger events, which is of course international as well as domestic.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really very, I would say, quite poignant with all of the discussions coming through here, and I'm sure it was, well, we all know it was playing an impact even prior to COVID, but this is technology within the industry, and how technology is not only being developed and used, but how it's perhaps even been further put priority on because of the COVID experience. So I'd just like to reach out to you, Ayman, and ask how you see the technology progressing in this industry, and again, what sort of areas with specific reference to technology that we need to be looking at. Sorry, Ayman, you're on mute. If you could just unmute yourself, please.
Again, the technology. There is a lot that should be looked at, especially as we previously discussed from the venues, hotels, but not only that. In my opinion, the biggest and most important part of the industry that need to look at the technology way more and give it way more importance than we ever did before is the event planner side, events management companies, DMCs and whatnot, because simply this is the way going forward. You can't be an event planner if you're not able to adapt, understand, comprehend, and deliver technology to the clients. Having hybrid events and virtual events being a major part of the industry going forward, events industry or meeting planners has to put a lot of investment, not only in the development of technology, like for instance, in Extra Mile, we've done in 2018, 2019, a lot more, like the increase of investment on industry from 2018, 2019 to 2020 has increased by 1,000% for us internally in the company. But the investment was divided in two aspects. The first is to actually develop the technology of events platforms and that supports our clients and supports the company to be able to offer a product to the client that's sufficient and working. What showed a greater value is actually the investment on reshaping the skills of our own events planners. And since we are a people industry, I think, or actually strongly believe that working out programs of technology training, technology skills to be acquired by our own people within the events industry, within the MICE industry in general, that will have the greater impact. And this is one very important area that we need to look at. So hence, we all need to have the technology investments in our budgets, not only for now, for all the years to come. Nevertheless, again and again and again, I will never stop saying it, to focus on our people more than the technology itself. Technology is very easy to acquire. The people to run the technology are the most difficult to acquire, and that's what will need a whole process to deliver to the market, our clients and our colleagues, personnels, events planners who are skilled enough to manage both the face-to-face, hybrid, and virtual events.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I think sometimes, especially when we talk about technology, we end up focusing just on exactly what is the latest and most high-tech systems we can bring in place. But perhaps we sometimes, or the end user sometimes may even get lost in that. And then, of course, what extra skills do you need to bring to the board? So I think that's a really interesting topic, and maybe one where I can circle back to Dr. Ali. As you mentioned, you were Bahrain is opening, or in the middle of constructing what I'm sure is going to be an amazing convention center. And how important has technology played when you look at creating an infrastructure that will be built for the MICE events of the future?
Of course, the technology is playing a big factor in this project. Well, we don't have only this project, we have many projects, and even due to the pandemic, we haven't stopped, those projects never been freeze or anything. And also the country never been locked down, or the Gulf Air was always flying in the air. So I think the experience of Bahrain has been taught even by WHO. So back to the MICE, which is the new Bahrain Exhibition and Convention Center. The current one we have, let me say the new one which we are proposing is 10 times bigger than the current one, and the budget which I mentioned at $220 million. This is only for the construction. I think we are very, we put the budget for the technology, which we are looking at it during this time, just to acquire the latest, So yes, we are working on that. The convention will be supplied by the latest equipment, latest parts of technology. And let me give you just few information about the project. The location is very strategic location, which is next to Bahrain International Circuit, where the Formula One is happening once a year. The plot size is 149,000 square meter. That's the total build-up, where we have exhibition space. Exhibition space is only 95,000, and the convention center is 20,000 square meter. The exhibition center is it's including 10 halls, each of gross floor area between 800 and 8,500 square meter. Convention center is an area of 20,000 square meter. We're including a grand hall capacity of 4,000 seats, and can be divided into 3 separate halls, 27 meeting rooms with total area of 1,700 square meter. Beside the concourse facility, shopping, restaurant, and so on. So the technology part, and I think thanks God we don't we delayed the technology part till this year. And thanks, it's going to have, with the kind of the changes in the market and so on. So with the opening by, as I said, by mid of 2022 or the third quarter of 2022, will be having the right tools, to capture the clients, the customers, and so on. To this project.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. I think there's a lot for us all to be excited there about as it opens up. I'd like to, I am conscious of time, we are running out of time, but Graham, if perhaps you could also give your perspective with regard, I know technology plays a huge part of your services, and perhaps if you would like to just give a bit of an update of where you're at with regards to technology at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ayman summarised it beautifully. Actually, I think this pandemic has accelerated the need to adopt technology across all parts of the industry, and it's critical, frankly, for the future. I would say that planners now need to embrace technology and software because they've got less resources, they've got less time, and need to be more to have better cost management. And of course, technology plays a key feature in that. But the adoption of technology for both planners and hoteliers will make operations more efficient. It's going to be critical as we recover. So if you look at the whole event spectrum, planners, for example, can source on an online software platform. They can manage large portions of their event online without needing to do it in person. If we talk about virtual events, technology is what facilitates virtual events. How do we make virtual events as engaging or as close to as engaging as in person? Again, it's technology. We've got an attendee hub platform that we've delivered over 90,000 events, I think, to date in the last year, that are just improving that engagement. But moreover, the most important part is technology is what facilitates the data that drives the ROI. out of the back of the event as well. So software and technology features across every part of the event platform, from the moment you source to the data and analytics at the back end. And I think we're seeing, hoteliers on the other side adopting a lot of this technology as well to cater for the planners' needs. So putting floor planning solutions on their online platforms so planners can actually do that online rather than having to visit the venue. Room block management for groups, the ability to use technology to respond to RFPs faster. And we're seeing a strong surge of planners that are adopting not just these technologies, but the sourcing platforms such as ours as well, to really improve those efficiencies, to measure what they're doing from a cost point of view, to collate their whole events program in one central place, which not many planners do have the ability to do. And we're seeing a lot of increased engagement across all of those areas. On the venue side, they're having to adapt as well to cater for the needs. So their marketing strategy is changing. What sort of messaging are they communicating about safety, about infrastructure and technology they can support the planner with? These are all things that feature technology to make things better. And of course, hybrid events is based on technology, right? So we spoke about the need for planners to educate themselves on how to manage these virtual and hybrid events. It's a dark art. There's a lot of solutions out there, but they're a lot of them are piecemeal. There's been a lot of startup companies that can do one part, but not the whole spectrum. And how do you navigate that? So I think a couple of my colleagues mentioned earlier, education is absolutely key if you're going to be a successful event planner or hospitality professional in the future. But like I said, I'd just like to summarize really by saying that technology is facilitating what we believe is going to be the golden age of events in the future. This whole virtual adoption has accelerated ROI from an events point of view. And remember that events are the second biggest revenue generator for any corporation behind their website. It's accelerating that. And when as in-person comes back and continues to grow, that wider audience we've reached since the start of the pandemic is going to drive increased engagement from an in-person perspective. But if you don't adopt technology now, then you will fall behind your competition. You won't generate the ROI that you are able to get unless you adopt it. But there's a lot of education required.
Yes, thank you, Graham. And I'm very conscious of the time, and I really did want to circle back to Emre because I know he's doing amazing stuff also at the Sofitel Bahrain there. I did want to ask him the question also how technology plays with still providing a sense of luxury as well. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that question, but I know a lot of people are contacted or in contact with Emre, especially on LinkedIn. And I'm sure he'll be able to give his expertise in that area as well. It's a lot of other areas. So I'm sorry, Emre, that we just unfortunately ran out of a little bit of time, because I know that a lot of other people covered with regards to the needs of a very good quality hospitality property as a partner in providing successful events, not just in the physical form, but also in a safe and also in a hybrid form as well. I think another big key takeaway from everyone is that it sounds like hybrid is very much here to stay. So it's not a case of either or, but we're going to all have to, with the new world, bring in new technologies that is always evolving anyway. And I think it sounds like it's going to also be positive in returning. There may be some measures in returning back, a lot of things still out of our control, but I think in this industry we're always upbeat in any case, and we know that there's a lot of professionals out there to bring it back as quickly as possible. So on that note, I would really like to again thank our panelists, Ayman, Graham, Emre, Dr. Ali, thank you very, very much for your time. And I would just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and may all your MICE events be always fun, inspirational, and provide a very solid ROI for you all. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.